Aloha, welcome to Hawaiian Studies. We're going to be going over one of many audio lectures throughout the course, and this is going to be an introduction to Pacific geography and geology. So we're going to start with the settlement of the Pacific, and that is going to be our primary topic, how the Pacific was settled, and namely arising out of the question, where did Hawaiians come from? Where did we come from? Where did the islands come from and its people? And in order to answer that, we have to look back into the Pacific, back deep into the Pacific, deep into the depths of time. And it's going to take us on a voyage through Polynesia, Melanesia, Micronesia. And for that foundation to even happen, we need to look at certain things about the Pacific in terms of geography and geology that are going to give us the answer to those very important questions. So let's move from here. So as you notice in this slide, there's all of what I call the nesias. So we want to sort of start with some base identification into what Pacific geography is, so where things are situated. And like the title says, no rhyme or region, making sense of it all. So we have the three major nesias, Melanesia, Micronesia, Polynesia, and which make up the basis of the Pacific. However, we also have Indonesia, and of course our term Austronesia, which we're going to be looking at, which is the word Austronesian, from which Austronesian is derived. And of course we have the various translations of what Melanesia, Micronesia, Polynesia, Indonesia, and Austronesia. So when you see the nesias, now you can make sense of it all. So realistically, these are kind of our general outline terms. So let's move on to the next. So after looking at all of our nesias, it becomes important to ask the question listed on the top of the slide there, what happened to amnesia? Okay, so that's just a little joke, a little pun there. But realistically, we want to look at the situation of Micronesia, Melanesia, and of course the Polynesian Triangle, which really take up a quarter of the Earth's surface, and there are many thousands of islands situated in the Pacific. Okay, but the important part that we're going to need to do here is to really sort of dissect looking at Pacific geography, because we don't want to get stuck with lines and boundaries and the lines that sort of encompass these three major regions. Okay, so what they are really realistically for you guys right now in this class, in the beginning of this section, is really they're kind of like training wheels. You got to think of them as training wheels that sort of get you towards the beginning of understanding Pacific geography, because realistically the Pacific is much more complex and much more fluid than these lines actually indicate, to the point that not everything that's Polynesian exists within the Polynesian Triangle, and not everything that is Melanesian exists only within Melanesia. So there are Polynesian elements outside of Polynesia, in Micronesia and Melanesia. And in terms of languages, we call these outlier languages. So there are Polynesian languages spoken in Micronesia as well as Melanesia. So it becomes very important to realize that the Pacific is not sort of demarcated by these set boundaries, but it's very much fluid, and that's a testament to its past, and that's a testament to its sort of infusion of itself over time, and it becomes very important to rely on this notion. And when we get to authors like Epeli Hau'ofa, who says that it's our sea of islands, so what we want to do is reverse this looking at it, because conventionally we're sort of trained with our eye to look at the Pacific in terms of this huge body of water punctuated by small dots of land, right? But actually what we want to do is reverse that. We want the ocean to be looked at as a continent, because those are our highways and our byways and the paths that connect us. So when we look at islands, the ocean surrounding it, in Pacific terms, are our continent, right? It's not something that's a barrier that connects island to islands. The oceans are freeways that connect us together, and they really connect our genealogy and our stories and legends and our economies and who we were as a whole. So that's a very important point that we're going to sort of go over our course. So indeed, when European explorers first entered the Pacific, they were trying to make sense of this vast, vast ocean and this vast, vast amount of cultures and languages. So what they did was they grouped areas, like aggregates, into like areas, and so they drew these maps with these lines, and they made these basic huge aggregate areas of Micronesia, Melanesia, and Polynesia that sort of were more similar to each other and less similar to other areas. But again, it's the training wheels. It's just the beginning. So for now, when you take your first map quiz, yeah, they should be there. But after a while, it should sort of dissipate, and just know for future reference too that yeah, the Pacific is way more complex and fluid. And okay, so that has to do with the basic geography. So now we're going to move on to the concept of an atoll. So we're going to look at an atoll. I know nothing at all about atolls, and we're going to take one in specific called Tetiaroa, which is in French Polynesia in Tahiti, right above Tahiti. And as you navigate from Hawaii to Tahiti, you kind of pass Tetiaroa Atoll. So several bits of information about it. It's in French Polynesia, just northeast of Tahiti Island. It's a small outlying atoll. It was owned by the late Marlon Brando, and now it is a nature preserve. So it's going to be our prototypical land base for studying the geology of the Pacific, okay? Because in order to understand the geology of the Pacific, we're really going to have to know a base, and that is going to be our atolls. So there you see a picture of Tetiaroa Atoll from the air. It has sort of the three main features of an atoll, which are islands protruding above the ocean. It has a lagoon, some sort of lagoon in the middle. Not all atolls have lagoons, but a reef, a barrier reef surrounding the atoll. So basically the islands, which are not very high, um, uh, and some sort of barrier reef around it, and some instances have a lagoon around there. So that's kind of the general makeup atoll. So when we look at the geography of islands, what we really have to do is look at life cycles. Okay, so on the picture to the right there, you see sort of the life cycles of islands in the Pacific, and atolls being one of them. Okay, so new volcanic island, older volcanic island. And what we're basically talking about is geology and erosion. So an island, a mass would protrude out from the surface of the water, grow, kind of like Hawaii Island. And as we sort of move from east to west in the Hawaiian Islands, we can see this very much happening, going from this eroded piece down to something that's barely rising and sitting above the ocean, which basically what an atoll is in this scheme of things. Okay, so now we want to sort of compare this, okay, to the Pacific as a whole, okay, and island and atoll formation, underwater volcanic activity, protrusion and buildup above the surface, erosion from the elements, barrier reef, and lagoon. So this is kind of the life cycle, right, that happens. So the important part to remember is what's written in blue. The geology of the Pacific as a whole is a mixture of all of these phases of island formation. That's right. So Hawaii Island, Tahiti, Bora Bora, Chuuk, any island in the Pacific, no matter what size or shape or form, is at some stage, is at one of these different stages of island formation. And that's how you sort of explain the differentiation of islands all across the Pacific. So let's look at some distinctions, okay, in terms of our three regions that we mentioned earlier, Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia, in terms of geography, okay, and distribution, okay. So in general, and these are just very general terms, again, very general, Melanesia tends to have large islands and short distances between the islands. Micronesia, as a general rule, small islands and atolls with short distances between those islands. Polynesia is sort of a kind of a hybrid admixture, large and small islands with relatively large distances between those islands. And that sort of gives Polynesia its unique makeup and kind of drives its unique position within settlement of the Pacific.